Rivenspire Lore, Part 2. House Tamrinth, a recent history. For the royal eyes of High King Emeric only. He loves it so when I start the reports this way. House Tamrinth of Rivenspire has holdings primarily in the western half of that region, with numerous business interests that include agriculture, mercantiles, and commerce. Indeed, it was only their thriving trade with the lands to the south that eventually led to strong ties with Stormhaven and the Wayrest. In many ways, the rivalry that marks the interplay of the three most prominent houses of Rivenspire, Tamrinth, Dorrel, and the Montclair, dates back to the late period of the First Era, as each house established its reputation and its fortune, and helped the region prosper. Of the three, Tamrinth has the strongest tradition of piety and religious commitment, and the house is often called upon Arche as its personal and most favoured deity. As the High King is well aware, a good portion of his youth was spent in the company of the two Rivenspire's nobles, Baron Esmark Tamrinth and Count Verandus Ravenwatch. And so it was with a heavy heart that the military might of Wayrest and its allies had to be turned against Rivenspire more than a decade ago. At the time, King Ransnare of Stormhelm declared war upon Wayrest and forced his nobles to join him in this losing effort. Whatever their true feelings towards Wayrest, the noble houses of Rivenspire obeyed the call of their king and fielded troops against the High King. In short order, House Tamrinth withdrew its support for King Ransnare and petitioned for peace. House Dorrel was quick to follow suit. Only House Ravenwatch, a relatively small concern compared to the other noble houses of Rivenspire, never took up arms. They had remained neutral throughout the year-long conflict. House Montclair, meanwhile, supported King Ransnare almost to the bitter end. They finally surrendered to Wayrest Alliance just before the battle that pushed Rance's remaining forces back to the palace known as Traitor's Tor. In the aftermath of the conflict, Baron Tamrinth emerged as a powerful force for peace and cooperation. It was his idea to form a ruling triumvirate to govern the region in the High King's name, and the leaders of all three noble houses pledged their loyalty to High King Emeric. The High King approved of the triumvirate, but also promised to select a new king of Shornhelm at the first opportunity. This one reminds the High King that this promise has yet to be fulfilled. Baron Esmark Tamrinth married the daughter of the House Eld, Janice, thus combining their fortunes and creating an even stronger political entity. The couple was blessed with two daughters, the pragmatic and thoughtful Elselde, and the stronger and somewhat wilder Genevieve. 4 years ago, Elselde left Rivenspire to broaden her education and religious studies in Stormhaven, where she was a guest of the High King's court for the majority of that time. During that same period, young Genevieve, against her father's and sister's wishes, joined the Shornhelm Guard. Elselde excelled at her studies, taking a particular interest in history, politics, diplomatic studies, and theology. She demonstrated a deep conviction for the teachings of Arche and the way of the light, while also surpassing her contemporaries as a healer and champion of riddle contests. It was clear she fully intended to prepare herself to eventually take the mantle of leader of House Tamrinth. Genevieve likewise surpassed expectations. She quickly demonstrated amazing combat prowess, military strategy, and an ability to lead others in battle. She earned a number of rapid promotions, eventually becoming captain of the guard. In addition to her role in the Shornhelm military, she also headed up personal troops of House Tamrinth. For the record, in times of war or other emergencies, it is not uncommon for house troops to join with the city guard to form a single fighting force to defend the region. If Genevieve has a fault, it is her quick temper and love, some might say, need for constant action. It is with sad tidings that I report the death of Baron Esmark Tamrinth. He passed away just a few short months ago of natural causes. Elselde immediately left Stormhaven to return to Rivenspire and take up the mantle of the house leader. Now, as Countess Elselde, she has taken her father's place as part of the ruling triumvirate of Rivenspire. So far, she's been performing admirably in the role, despite constant disagreements with Baron Dorrel. How she will interact with Baron Montclair is yet to be demonstrated, as the Baron has been absent from court these past few months, tending to the needs of his ailing wife. Barring unforeseen circumstances, I see a bright future ahead for the newly appointed Countess of House Tamrinth. For the High King, Chancellor Regina Torvios, of the Department of Interior Affairs. North Point, an assessment. This report on the city of North Point and its primary noble house, Durrell, was ordered directly by His Majesty High King Emmerich and has been painstakingly researched. I, Chancellor Regina Torvios, of the Department of Interior Affairs, personally oversaw this effort and verified the accuracy of the information contained therein. First, some history for context. Captain Yerick Flaudius, an enterprising Breton trader, operated the summer route from shipping from Daggerfall to Solitude, established North Point during the 9th century of the First Era. Though the shores here do not form an ideal harbour, Yerick knew that deep waters approaching them could easily accommodate large vessels, and that the location along the trade route made for a perfect way station where traders could resupply, make repairs, or shelter through storms. He constructed the first docks at North Point, the best anchorage, and named the port after it. Soon after building the docks, Captain Flodus oversaw the addition of a small walled keep and a warehouse at the heights of Dors Elard, to the east of the growing port of Gaul. Before long, the town bustled with activity, and Flodus, realizing the success of his venture, took the name of the mountain as his new family name. He and his relatives continued to grow their maritime endeavors, as well as develop and invest in the port and the surrounding lands, eventually leasing plots to farmers and establishing new sources of income. For most of the First Era, the family exemplified the type of active, entrepreneurial merchant princes that brought great prosperity to High Rock. In the First Era, 1029, the Dorrells were granted a baronetcy, where the Emperor Hestra joined High Rock to the First Empire. The fortunes of House Dorrell and North Point have waxed and waned with the flow of the northwest coastal trade ever since. In the 24th century, the Dorrells, having continued their rise in wealth and power, held the monarchy of Shornhelm for several generations. This distinction coloured the family's image of itself throughout subsequent centuries, and the Dorrells regarded themselves among Rivenspire's true elite even today. It also gave them a taste for political intrigue, which, combined with their already ambitious spirit, has made the house impossible to ignore. The current Baron of the House, Allard, wields significant power as one of the triumvirate of nobles who have ruled over Rivenspire since the fall of King Ransnir. Along with the leaders of House Montclair and House Tamrinth, Allard Durrell has pledged himself to the High King and hopes to one day earn the right to rule as the sole King of Shornhelm. In recent times, House Durrell excels as a maritime and mercantile power. They maintain a mansion in Shornhelm for the Baron and Baroness, keeping the house closely involved in the happenings of the court. The estate at North Point is left to other relatives, through oversight of its lands remains integral to the family operations. At present, the young but very capable Lord Ellic, son of Baron Allard, manages the family's holdings around North Point, while his father is at court and serving on the triumvirate. The Durrells are militaristic and politically savvy, and the mercantile traditions have forged a level of wealth rarely seen in Rivenspire circles. House Durrell has generated extensive ties with the merchants in Solitude. This, they are quick to point out, has nothing to do with sword-rattling of policies. To Durrell, this is simply good business. From my study of the three noble houses of Rivenspire that form the ruling triumvirate, I recommend that you place little trust in House Montclair, and be cautious with any interaction with them. Their true loyalties are only to their own aspirations. House Durrell, on the other hand, while also ambitious, seems to possess a degree of honour and love of country rarely exhibited by the Montclairs, who seem overly proud of their heritage to Ransir. House Tamrinth, meanwhile, has always been loyal and a friend to Wayrest. However, the Countess is relatively new to her role as house leader, and may not be ready to assume greater responsibilities. Shornhelm, Crown City of the North, by Lord Wylon, 39th Baron Montclair. The Breton people of the Mark, Waste and Moor and Shornhelm Heights have long and storied history, with much to be proud of. The trampling of the giants in the time of the legends, the purge of the weird hags in the year of Sun's death, which restored Magnus to the skies of Mundus, and the charge of the Montclair Knights, often erroneously referred to as the charge of the Shornhelm Knights, at the Battle of the Clenumbra Moors. Through all this tumultuous history, the people of Rivenspire are fortunate to have been ably led through times of terror and triumph by the noble lords of the House of Montclair. It is true that the barons of House Montclair have not always been selected by fate to also reign as King of Shornhelm, but the Montclairs count humility among their many virtues, and have often been willing to defer to pretenders with weaker claims to royalty in the interests of peace. That is, this humility has sometimes been tragically overindulged, was sadly proven in the case of my father, Philegon, 38th Baron of Montclair. As all students of Breton history know, the greatest post-Riemann monarch of Shornhelm was King Hulbert, who led our army at the Battle of Grandentor and ruled the north from the Second Era 522 until his death in 546. Hulbert was of House Braquet, 21st Count of that name, and had taken his Queen Countess Iphylla of Montclair. When King Hulbert died, his legitimate son, Prince Phaelgion, was only 14 years of age, and though his inheritance was championed by House Montclair, Houses Braquet and Tamrinth supported his elder half-brother, Prince Ranzir, who had been born out of wedlock to a poor Tamrinth cousin. House Durrell, typically aloof, declined to endorse either candidate. What is less well known is the behind-the-scenes maneuvering that led to Ranzir being crowned King of Shornhelm rather than Phaelgion. The advisers of the young Baron Montclair, his mother had predeceased the King Hulbert by a mere 2 years, contended that he, as the legitimate son, was the proper heir to the throne, a claim further buttressed by the language in a codicil in the famous Bretonnic Nathalie that declared House Montclair the royal house of Shornhelm. The Council of the North met to consider the various claimants, but during their deliberations the Montclair advisers found that the Bretonnic codicil had gone missing, which Prince Ranzir brought forth a suspiciously long-lost Durrani decree that named House Braquet their Breton royal delegates in Rivenspire. The vote of the council was a narrow victory for Prince Ranzir, thereafter King Ranzir of Shornhelm. Some of Prince Phaelgion's advisers urged him to fight for the crown, but the young prince declined, preferring to become simply Baron of Montclair. Oh, hateful, fateful humility. We all know where Phaelgion's deference led, to the tragic events of 566 and the insurrection against the First Daggerfall Covenant in what was known to our shame as Ranzir's War. According to the standard histories, all the noble houses, Montclair, Tamrinth, even Dorrel, answered the King Ranzir's call to muster and marched behind his banner in his fateful war against High King Emeric and the South. What is not generally known is that Count Phaelgion of Montclair was uncertain of the rightness of Ranzir's cause, and offered both Kings Ranzir and Emeric to serve as peace envoy between the two sides. High King Emeric's reply has been long lost to history, but Ranzir's angry refusal is well known. Once again my father deferred to his elder half-brother, and the Montclair Knights joined Ranzir's doomed army. In the immediate aftermath of King Ranzir's fall, Rivenspire fell into chaos. The crown of Shornhelm went missing during the Battle of Traitor's Tor, and the fateful Durrani decree that elevated Ranzir to the throne has likewise not been seen since. The death of Ranzir was the end of the line of House Braquet, and since then there has been no king in Shornhelm, Rivenspire having been jointly ruled by the triumvirate of the Council of the North. That body has tried with the best of intentions to keep the peace and order in the northern counties, but nobody, if they were speaking honestly, would say the council's efforts have sufficed. Shornhelm and the North needs a king. And why shouldn't they have one, if I may speak frankly, setting aside, however, regretfully, the tradition of the Montclair mantle of humility? Then I must confess that I, Baron Wylon of Montclair, am certainly the legitimate heir of the throne of Shornhelm. My grandfather was King Hulbert, and I am descended from the direct and legitimate line of succession, a claim no one else in the North can make. That also makes me the sole living heir to the domain of the Braquets, much of which was unfairly parcelled out to the Tamrinths and Dorrels. But, no. Humility. Always humility. Furthermore, At this critical juncture, I am fortunate to be able to announce that the long-missing Bretonnic codicil has been found by the Montclair House historian, the operative clause of which I shall quote here. Seeing all in order, then Shamhelm and its lands contiguous, the most royal and high, appointeth in perpetuity said House Montclair in rulership over, and Shamhel, so moted be. People of Rivenspire, Baron Wylon of Montclair is prepared to do his duty. I hope you've been enjoying these lore readings, and if you have, please do consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for watching.